This is the BuildASoil 10x10, episode 3. I wanted to discuss this quadrant 2 with you. You might have noticed from the last video, we just finished the transplanting. Rolling into that next, we need to fill up the 3x3 planter that I told you we're going to use in this area. And to do that, I'm pretty excited. Underneath this table, we're actually going to move this out. Once we get the females identified, we're going to put 4 plants in this 3x3 planter, and we're going to put it in here. Of course, I'll clean it all out. This is a mess from yesterday. This 3x3 planter will open up, and it's plastic lined, and we're actually going to put PVC in here to support it and build a garden bed, but I need to fill it with soil. So we're going to go outside the tent today, and I'm going to make from scratch our new BuildASoil take and bake recipe, which is enough soil to fill this up and have a really successful grow. We're going to send it to the lab, show you the results. Gonna have a lot of fun with it. I've got everything on the pallet. I'm pretty excited to do this because this is bringing us back to our roots. How we started was making soil from scratch, seeing the results that came with that, and wanting to share it with everybody. This recipe was specifically designed to fit a target window for the home grower that's gonna be most likely to give them success. So to start, I'm gonna grab a grassroots 100-gallon fabric pot. Now you could just use a tarp. You can use Rubbermaid tubs, whatever you want. But the goal is to mix all these ingredients together. And since it's 70 gallons of stuff, a 100-gallon container will hold it. And then when we're cooking the soil, when you mix all these organic ingredients together, it'll actually warm up from the soil biology. And we need that moisture and that warmth to stay in one place. So if I used a tarp, I'd actually wrap it up and cover it. In a 100-gallon, it's already a good volume. And I'm just gonna make sure that we leave it out of direct light and it's all gonna come together on its own. And that way it'll still breathe. So let's get started. I'm just gonna open the 100-gallon and I'm gonna start making the soil. I'm gonna do it with my bare hands. You can use a shovel if you'd like, but this is how I do it. And I wanna show you exactly what I would do. Bam, let's get going. So the beginning is a little weird. On a tarp, you just throw everything out. With a 100-gallon, these walls are gonna kind of fall in. You could easily have someone help you with this, but once I get a little material in here, it'll start to hold itself open. This is the beginning part where it's a little weird, right? So right now, what I wanted to do is decide which ingredient is gonna go in first. Essentially, I could just dump all this together and stir it. But because there's only this much nutrient and this much mineral, I wanna make sure that I sprinkle it on as a top layer so that it's even across the whole volume of soil. So the way I'm gonna do it is build this kind of like a 7-layer dip, like a lasagna. I'm gonna start with layers and then keep layering it until we're done, and then I'm gonna stir it all together. And throughout that process, I'm gonna add the right amount of moisture, and I'll discuss that as well. And in the moisture, I'm gonna add our wetting agent. And our wetting agent is gonna be what helps the soil come together in an even amount of moisture, if that makes sense. What I'd like to do is go over everything that's here. Instead of me trying to show you right now, I'll show you as I go. And online, you can find the list of ingredients. Real quickly, we've got peat moss. We've got rice hulls, pumice, we've got worm castings and compost. Those all need to get mixed together with our nutrients, minerals, and biochar. And I'm gonna explain it right now and get started. So first things first, peat moss. Our bags, if you've never worked with a bag like this for feed, all you do is take the top corner here and you pull. And that unstitches it. The reason why we use these bags is that we actually reuse them sometimes locally. Because they're so durable, but they won't break. And if we bag stuff up in those thin bags and stuff breaks by the time it gets to you, it's not gonna make a premium soil. So here's what the peat moss is like. It's already been through our machine to get all fluffed up. You can see the texture's beautiful compared to what you normally buy in a bale. I'm gonna dump this in as the bottom layer. Just gonna put it all in here. And I'm gonna dump the first one in. Okay, you can see what it looks like. That's it. Now I'm gonna put all the peat moss in here and that'll start to hold the walls open. What you don't want is the walls to get the material in and dump it on your floor. With the tarp, it's kind of similar, but I promise once we get this going, the walls will hold themselves and it'll be a lot easier. Let's keep going. Now this kit comes with 4 bags of peat moss, 4 cubic feet. And you can get a bale of peat moss. A lot of times when you get them locally, they're like leftover from 2 years ago. They've got holes in them. They're all compressed. We get fresh peat moss directly from Canada. We use it so quick that it's like this year's, right off the boat, ready to go. You could use cocoa coir and a few other things, but we prefer peat. And we could talk about that all day. We'll save it for another episode where we talk about sustainability, shipping. We feel like peat moss is better than cocoa for a number of reasons, but some of our customers will use a little bit of both. Okay, this should hold up the walls now. You're gonna have to deal with this too. It's silly, but it's better than doing it on the floor. Okay, now that I've got enough peat in here, the walls are held open and it makes my job easy. The peat's already fairly fluffed, but one of the things I wanna show you in here are these little chunks. Now, when you get it in a big bale, there's bigger ones, but this went through our peat fluffing machine. This is about the biggest chunk you'll find. You can spend some time and break up every clump. I don't think it's totally necessary. I like differences in texture when we're making potting soil, but just make sure there's no big ones. You can go through here, break it up with your hand. Getting your hands in there is really part of the process. But you also don't want to breathe all this. So if it is really dry, some of the moisture will be different depending on timing of the year. You can start to moisten it right now. That way there's no dust in your house. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'll get started on the next step. To do that, we have a special product that comes as part of the package. In fact, I'm gonna have to go grab it, and then we're gonna start moistening this. Let's go grab it. It's the BuildASoil Saponaria, which is a saponin extract powder. Normally we use either the Thermex 70, which is like a molasses looking. It's high in saponin. This one's just a little easier, a little more potent. I want them to use a wetting agent because it'll make sure there's no dry pockets. That'll give them a better result. So this is the BuildASoil Saponaria. You can use any wetting agent. This is my preferred. It's organic. We paid extra to get the organic version. It's a saponin extract. And so really all I need is like 1/10 of a teaspoon here. I'm just gonna sprinkle a tiny bit in. I've got 3.5 gallons of water here. The reason I'm doing 3.5 gallons of water is I'm making about 70 gallons of soil, and I like to water about 5% by volume. So 10% would be 7 gallons, 5% is the 3.5. I think it's gonna work perfect. And right now I'm gonna put, about a little less than a teaspoon in here. You can measure it if you'd like, but what I'm gonna do is just pour a little in my hand like I did in the last video. That's all I'm gonna add. I'm gonna put that in the water, and that'll make it real soapy. The reason why we needed to get kind of soapy or saponin rich is that'll make it foam, and the foam will help spread the moisture in here, because this peat moss, it actually won't hold moisture, it repels it until it's saturated. At that point, then it'll hold the moisture. And we wanna have even moisture in here because that's what nutrients and biology and all that prefer. They don't want dry pockets. So I'll set the saponin powder down. I'm gonna stir it, and then I'm gonna pour it in my sprayer. Now, you don't have to stir this in a bucket, pour it in your sprayer. I just wanted to show you that a very small amount actually creates a decent amount of foam, and that's what is gonna be helping to wet our soil. There's like 100 different types of saponin, and the Saponaria extract has a diverse amount of them, very natural. I'm gonna put all 3.5 gallons in because I intend on using all of this while we mix our soil today. Nice thing about cooking soil, when you make it from scratch, is this is gonna sit for about 2 weeks. You don't have to sit that long, but when you plan ahead, it all comes together really well. So it's a little harder to under or overdo the watering. What I wanna avoid is over watering, because I don't want it like mud. I want it to be nice texture so the biology grows in it. See all this foam in the top? That's from the tiny bit of saponaria that we added, and that's gonna help do all the wetting here in the potting soil. All right, I'm gonna spray the sides down a little. And now the nice thing about this 100 gallon, now that I've got it going, is you can kind of shake it in the middle a little bit and expose some more material, and that's one of the ways we'll mix without using a shovel, just by using this bag. Now I'm mainly doing this just to get a little moisture in this first level, also keep the dust down, but I'm not trying to just completely saturate it. When I'm done, that's when I'll completely saturate it. It'll be easier to mix when it's not completely wet. Okay, that's good enough for me. That'll keep the dust down. So a couple things you can do. You can start sprinkling some nutrients and amendments on here and then layering compost like I mentioned. I'm gonna do the nutrients and minerals last because it's a pretty good surface area here. I think we can cover it all and mix it in. And so next up, let's see, what should I do? I think I'm gonna add compost aeration and just kind of keep it going. As long as we have the peat in there and I'm cognizant that everything has to be mixed, there's no real order that you have to go through here, so don't get too weird about it. I've got rice holes. We send you 1 rice hole and 2 pumice. Looks like there was an extra rice hole in this one. So I'm going to make sure, because we were just building this. When we do the kit, you're going to get 2 cubic feet of the pumice and 1 cubic foot of rice holes. We were experimenting with some different weights and percentages. I had the guys bring me a whole bunch of bags. So I'm just going to not confuse things, kick this out of here. All right. Here's the pumice. This is a 3/8 by quarter. This is our standard pumice. If you see a 3/8 minus, that means you'll get the sand. The 3/8 by quarter is a really clean version. And that's the size of granule you can expect. Pull this off, dump it in. Right. Now, when you start learning about making soil, there's certain percentages you want to allow for peat moss, compost, pumice. And a rough percentage is about 33% of each. This recipe is closer to 50% peat, 25% compost, and 30% aeration. Those numbers don't matter. I just want to give you some ballparks of why we chose these quantities. You can see the pumice doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just making like a layer of it. And then I'm going to go to the next one, which I'm going to do rice holes. 1 cubic foot of rice holes. Now, rice holes are the actual hole from the seed of rice. So when they make rice, these ones have been parboiled so nothing germinates, and it's an organic certified version and tested for heavy metals, the whole deal. You can see what it looks like in there. They're actually the shells from the rice seed, or the hull. And these are made mostly from silica, so it's not like straw. It's actually like glass almost. They're really made from something that's more like a rock than it is organic matter. But it helps add aeration, and we also need silica in our soil for good yield and to make trichome, all the stuff we want. So we're going to use it. The reason we don't use all rice holes is those eventually break down, and the pumice will stay around forever. We don't use perlite because perlite is mined obsidian that's then spent a lot of energy to expand and puff like popcorn. And when you go mine obsidian that they're running out of and you puff it like popcorn, it's so lightweight that it's good for shipping and it's good to make money and profit, but it's not good for long-term living soil because the perlite will float to the top, and we want to keep our soil forever. So the pumice is what we decided to use. It's really clean. It's used in the beauty industry, food industry, so we have like heavy metal tests, all the documentation on it. And this one comes from New Mexico. So now I've got the rice holes, I've got the pumice, and I've got it above the peat, and I've kind of made some layers. I can start mixing this together, but I've got so much more that I'm going to just keep adding this entire thing before I mix it all. You can mix halfway through, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to do pumice last, I think, and I'm going to start putting the compost in now. Let me show you how pretty this stuff is. This is the Ole Mountain fish compost, and it's been around forever. They're a hardwood company, and they make a hardwood compost as a byproduct, and a hardwood takes a couple years to break down. So to help with that, they put whole fish from Alaska in here, and also some yard waste. And while we don't like yard waste compost, we've invested a lot of money testing this out for any problems, and it's always tested really well. And because it's from fish and hardwood, it's a dark, black, humic-rich compost that our customers have come to really enjoy. And I'll dump it in here so you can see how pretty it is. Look at how black that is against the rice hulls. Now, the thing about a yard waste compost is you might find a piece of glass in here or a tiny piece of plastic. Main reason is they make thousands of yards of this, and they have a screening machine that sometimes won't reject everything. And so don't get scared. This is compost. It's totally safe and natural. Composting breaks down a lot of the problems in nature, and this is what we're after. I mean, it'll stain your hands black. It's so rich in humic acid. Look at that. All right, let's layer it out. Here, see? I'll be honest and mention it. There's a little piece of plastic. I mean, in one bag, that's the most I would ever expect to find. If you have some crazy issue, obviously tell us. We've gone through hundreds of truckloads and never really had a problem bigger than that. So there you go. All right, now, next I have castings and more pumice. And I have a little more peat moss, so I only put 3 bags in there. I'm gonna keep my layer going. You don't have to follow the exact layer. I'm just trying to layer it so that when I get my hands in there and mix, it all mixes together really well. But now you can see how this 100-gallon is starting to make sense. It's not flopping in on itself anymore. It's holding its own weight up on the sides. And then let's see. Might as well. I've got biochar, and this is made from local beetle kill wood. And what they do, if you research biochar, it's like a whole nother organic rabbit hole you can go down. But they heat wood. They basically burn it, but without the presence of air, and so it pyrolyzes it, turns it into like a charcoal, and it's really high carbon. So this is high organic matter. It holds a nice amount of nutrients. The problem is if you just dump biochar in your soil, it'll actually absorb your nutrients like a sponge and steal from your soil. So what we do is we pre-inoculate this with Root-Wise Microbe Complete and some organic amino acids, some nitrogen, to help it absorb nutrients to give to the soil instead of take from the soil when we first add it. And I like to add anywhere from 2 to 10% depending on the recipe. You don't want to add too much. And so this bag, being that it's 2 gallons and we're making 70, puts us in that target range where we're not doing 10%, right? But we're closer to that 5% number. There's the biochar. Look at that. It's beautiful. And this is professionally made. You can make it at home, but when we make it professional, we get a lot of testing on it to make sure that it is the ideal properties we're looking for, and it's completely finished. Okay. Now that I've got some more peat on here, and the peat is the stuff that I want to get with the wetting agent, I'm going to hit it again. Make sure there's a little moisture everywhere. Now at the end, I'm going to water all this water on there. But like I said, when I go to mix, I don't want to be mixing with like mud. It'll be harder to distribute all the nutrients. So I'm just going to knock this down, keep the dust down, get a little moisture right on the peat. All right. Now this will be heavy, so you want to mix it in a spot where you can leave it. We've got some manpower around here, so if we have to move this, we can. But we're going to leave it in here for probably a week or two before we actually put this in our 3x3 container. And I'm going to show you how much probiotic, like it's going to be growing mycelium on here from the Kashi Blend and just be alive. And compared to being stale in all these bags, kind of almost sterile. Compost is alive, but once it hits plant roots, once it gets all of the moisture, it really starts to come to life. So there we go. Okay, what's next? We've got worm castings and pumice. So might as well just keep layering. I think I'll do the worm castings last. We'll do this pumice. There we go. Pumice. Now these worm castings we specifically get by the truckload, and they're fed organic vegetable material, and that makes it so that soil mixing is very consistent. Now here I want you to notice the only difference in this is in our worm castings we double bag it because we want to keep it alive. These bags will breathe and the castings can dry out. So inside your bag you're going to see this double liner. Let me show you how pretty these castings are when I dump them out. Pretty cool. Look at that. Black gold. That's why they call it black gold. Because it looks like black humic rich material like that ollie compost, but it's made by worms, and that makes all the nutrients available. And the way worms do it is they don't eat it. They actually put a whole bunch of biology. They put enzymes on the material that like to break down until it breaks it down biologically, and then they kind of slurp it through their system. So now we're at the point where I can start mixing. The last layer is going to be mineral and nutrients. And then we got to get our hands in here and mix this all together. Now in a 100-gallon, it's getting pretty close to full. It's going to be a little tight in here. So if I was doing this on large scale, I'd put it in a big mixer, do it on a huge tarp. But in this container, it's perfect for your house, and you'll still be able to get to the bottom and mix in here, and I'll show you what I mean. Let's add the nutrients and minerals. This is the last step. Here's the nutrient. I'll add the minerals first. The order doesn't matter. I'll set it right here. Same thing, go to the corner on the right side of the bag if you're facing the front and pull. That'll release everything. And you can see here what the minerals look like. We're talking rock dust and calcium and all the good stuff. If you want to look online, we have all of the ingredients listed. We're totally transparent. There's no secrets here at all as far as ingredients. This is all measured. You're just going to put everything in. This is for 9 cubic foot of soil. You don't have to like weigh it all out. We've already done all the hard work for you. Mix this all together and we're ready. But there's no secrets. If you wanted to buy every single ingredient by itself, you could do the same thing. Look at this nutrient kit. Beautiful. No bone meal, no blood meal, none of that fake organic bullshit that you get from a lot of the other lower priced quasi-organic companies. And it's because we weren't educated. When we're all educated, we know what's good. It's harder to slip stuff by us. So here we go. God, it's beautiful. I love doing this. I miss this. I used to make a lot of soil by hand. Now, of course, we got machines and lots of employees. Okay. When you make it by hand, you just know what goes in there. A lot of these soil companies don't even make their own soil. They send it off to some processor who makes 1 million recipes for every industry, and they just get to kind of choose what they think is going to be on the conveyor belt that day. We live this. We do this every day, and so I want to show you how you can do it with your own 2 hands in your garage, right in your bedroom, wherever it is, with this 100-gallon pot and a little moisture. You can kind of even keep the dust down. So let's get started. My whole goal is to make sure this is even. The nice thing is if I were to grow right in here, it doesn't have to be perfect because the plant's going to access the nutrient. But if I'm going to take this and put it in 1-gallon pots, I want to make sure that it's pretty even all the way through. So all I have to do is start to mix it and get in there. And that's all I'm going to do is just start to fluff it. Now you want to make sure you go all the way to the pocket. So I'm going to kind of mound it like this from the sides and make it like a volcano in the middle, and that's going to drop stuff down where it shuffles. But I'm not going deep enough right now. So what I'll do is once I get all the way down to the sides, I'll go back to the middle. See how I'm reaching all the way? I can touch the floor right here. But you can see if this was totally saturated in water, it'd be kind of sticky and it wouldn't flow like this to get a good mix on. So I'm going to go around a circle 1 time. Now, because I've gone around 1 time, I haven't really mixed the middle. So here's what I'll do. Now I'm going to go to one side. Get to the middle, start to go to the edges. Okay, and I can feel where it's not mixed, and I'm trying to get to the bottom. Make like a hole. And this 100-gallon container is just enough to do it in. See all those minerals? Starting to get it all come together. All the way down. I mentioned you could use a shovel. You might rip your bag a little bit, but it might make it easier for you. I just love getting my hands in there. They say it's good for you. All the probiotics. It's good for the mind. I also think that all these probiotics help our body defend disease and everything else. Look at that, it's already turning into soil. And I'm just using my hands. Now here's another thing you can do. You can grab the edges. Start to lift and flip. See how it kind of like grabs some stuff off the edges? Now you don't have to do all this in one go. It's a lot of work, even though it's a small amount of soil. And we don't want there to be any pockets, like I just found of rice holes. So you can always take a break. Now as I go around, it's harder to find pockets. You can see how it's coming together. Don't let that make you stop. Keep going to your positive, but it doesn't take that much work. Okay, I think we're almost done. I'm going to give a little bit more here just to make sure we're thorough. And then I'm going to go to that last step where I actually water this in. All we really ask is that you hit the like button, maybe subscribe, share it with somebody that might benefit from this. And we'll keep making these videos. We'll keep being transparent about all of our ingredients. And if you live in another country and we can't ship to you, just buy all the stuff and make it yourself. You don't need to buy it from us. This isn't even our recipe. I mean, we just taken what we've been given throughout the years and done some testing, found some premium products and made it work. Now, looks really good all the way. I'm gonna even it out. That way it doesn't create pools of water when I go to add the moisture right now. You'll notice this is plastic lined. That'll keep it all even. It'll breathe through the top. And you can cover that with straw or like with a tarp if you want. But I'm gonna leave it open. I'm gonna sprinkle the Kashi Blend on. You're gonna have an exact ½ pound. I've got a 1 pound bag here just because I jump the gun a little bit sometimes. So I'm gonna put half this on there. You're gonna put your whole bag on there, the whole ½ pound. and I'm gonna water it in. I'm gonna water half the water, then I'm gonna dump that and water the rest. It doesn't matter, I just don't want that dry. I want that to be wet too. You can just dump the water in and stir it around, but when you slowly water like this and you've got the wetting agent in there, the sapinaria, it makes sure that the moisture is super even in here. And it almost forces it to take every pocket to be perfectly moistened in here because I'm just slowly watering it everywhere evenly. And by the time we're done here, it should be barely coming out the bottom, if any, because the wetting agent that we use is gonna hold it so that water doesn't spill out all over the bottom. Now with moistening, the rule is less is more. I can always come back tomorrow and add a little more water. What I can't do is come squeeze this like a sponge if I overwater it. And if you overwater, the biology doesn't like it. There's no more oxygen in there, no more air. It gets suffocated, it gets drowned. Don't drown your soil. Don't make a soup. What you want to do is make something, I'll show you at the end when I'm done, where when you pull out and when it's sat for a while, the moisture has to move through it. When it's sat for a while, you come back 30 minutes later, you should be able to squeeze it and almost barely get a drop of water to come out. If you squeeze it and it's dumping water like a wet towel, you've gone too far. And so I would advise you to underwater, wait half an hour, and then just make sure. You can always add more water as we go later. So with watering, with living soil, we're typically trying to stay in the 5% to 10% by volume range. And what that means is that if we've got 70 gallons of soil, the most we'd ever water at one time would be 7 gallons. And that's usually if it's got plants growing in it and it's on the drier side. With fresh soil that already had a tiny bit of moisture in the compost, I'm gonna go for 5%. That's 3.5 gallons in a 70-gallon container, which the take and bake is 70 gallons or just a little under. And then this is 3.5 gallons, so it works perfect. I'm gonna unload the whole sprayer on here. And it takes a few minutes to unload a whole sprayer this way, but it's worth it. You don't have to slow water like this every time. You can get just a water can and water in here, really. There's no wrong way to do it. What I don't wanna see you do is just dump it straight in. I wanna see you use a water can, water around to make sure the moisture gets even. Otherwise, you're gonna have to mix it all again. And the faster you dump, the more likely it is to just spill out the bottom. Let me show you what I mean. I've been spraying for a while now, watch. It's dry right there. I barely moved it an inch and it's dry. So even though I was just spraying it for a little while, it's very slowly creeping in. That's why I'll wait half an hour when I'm done. So, but that means it's gonna be even. All right, so I have about a gallon left in here. So I'm like, 2/3 of the way done with this can. I'm gonna stop right now, add the Kashi Blend, and then I'm gonna water that in. And that'll be the last step here before we let this soil just sit around and come together biologically. So let me grab this right now. Grab the Kashi Blend. Now, I mentioned in the video, I wanted to have this just right, but you're gonna get a 1/2 pound. It's the perfect amount. This is a 1-pounder we did for like a food composting system we do. But I had it and it allowed me to do the video today, so I ran with it. Compostable bag. I'm gonna dump half this in here. So I'm just gonna pinch it off so I don't overdo it. I'm gonna go for it. All I'm trying to do is sprinkle it evenly around here. I don't want it to be clumped up in one spot too much. And this is full of probiotics. It's been all fermented together and it's got organic inputs as well that are similar to our soil. And so it just kind of brings it all together on the surface. That's it. I put half of it in there. You don't really need to work it in because I'm gonna water it, but I just wanna make sure that it's even. That's about it. All right, there we go. You can see it's just on the surface there, and now it's moist, which means that it's gonna start to bloom all the life in here. And I'm gonna finish wetting it because I really think it's gonna take all of this 3.5 gallons. And when I'm done, I'll reach in there and squeeze it so I can show you exactly how much moisture is in the soil. But just trust me, if you're making 70 gallons, you use 3.5 like we said, that's 5%, you'll be fine. Now you could grow right in this container, but this recipe is for less than 100 gallons. And this is mainly just to make your soil in. We expect people will use 15-gallon containers, 30-gallon containers, whatever they like. They'll scoop out of here. This is just to hold your soil. But you could plant right in here, and you could just keep top dressing or add more soil later. It would work. So whatever's best for you. All right, let's see. 1/4 gallon left or so, so we're almost there. And I did want to remind you, everything that we put in here, like literally everything, the wetting agent, the biochar, it's all comes in the take and bake kit. There's not one piece you're missing. It's all properly weighed and measured so that all you have to do is put it all in here. You don't have to think about it. The only thing we don't use completely is the sapinaria wetting powder. This is gonna last you multiple grows. It's so potent, and you're gonna wanna keep using it to make sure that anything you add to the soil will be evenly distributed wall to wall, and it'll really help the process. All right, we're to the end of the can. That's it. Looks perfect. Now what I want to do is dig in here one last time and show you what the moisture looks like. So I could let this sit for like 20 minutes, come back, because it's going to take a while for that moisture to move all the way through down. But let's just open it up right here. See how nice it is? See how down below it's still a little dry? After 20, 30 minutes, that's going to soak in and come together. And you can see there's not, see how that moisture's coming out? That's too much, but it's just on the top. When it goes all the way through and we come back later, I'll show you what it looks like. So it's been 6 days since we made the BuildASoil Take and Bake kit, and I wanted to walk you over to the 100-gallon grassroots pot that we've got. And this, if you watch the whole video, in the beginning we mixed this soil. It's called the BuildASoil Take and Bake. Today, I wanted to show you what it looks like, show you some of the biological activity, and also give you some tips on how to know when it's ready to use in your garden. So let's take a look down here. Set my coffee cup down. I'm gonna grab a thermometer. You don't need a thermometer, but it allows me to visually show you what I'm talking about. When you mix together organic amendments, compost, and peat moss, that's gonna combine carbon and nitrogen together, and there's gonna be a responsive biology that goes to break it down, and it can actually heat up. And this heating, they have different names for the processes. Essentially, all you need to know is if it's hot to the touch with your hand in the middle, you probably don't wanna use it yet. More importantly though, we're kind of composting here if we mix a bunch of things together. So if it does get hot, we wanna let that sit for a day or two and then mix it all back together so that the outsides that were never hot get to the inside that is hot. With this recipe, it's never gonna go hot, but I don't like to use the word never. So I just wanna share with you the fundamental principles you need in case you wanna add more to this recipe or you're making a different recipe in the future. They are prone to heat up, especially if we go over 1 cubic yard in volume. So if you buy 2 of these kits and you make them all at the same time, it might go hot. At the 70-gallon rate, it's probably not gonna happen. So take a look in here. You can see some life. So all around here, I mean, this is in the open air. It's pretty unbelievable, you can still see it, but there's this white mycelium like fuzz on here. And you can go down the rabbit hole, get a microscope, try and identify it. But typically when we're inoculating with beneficials, with products that we've purchased and making soil from good, clean compost, all we're gonna get is the explosion of growth from all those beneficials. And I don't believe you really need a microscope to identify any of this. Kind of like with fermented vegetables, you can kind of try to identify the exact lactobacillus and everything that's in your fermented vegetable, or you can trust that for thousands of years people have eaten them and it's never caused any harm. Same thing with the potting soil. We look for this life in here. You can see it makes a nice texture. You can see all of the growth that's on here, breaking down the amendments because the moisture was right. In the beginning of this video, we talked about how to know how much water to add, and that was important. Let me show you the temperature. We're gonna go right in the middle, and you can see that the temperature's not jumping. If you don't have a thermometer, you can dig your hand in there. And all we're looking for is to make sure that it stays around room temperature. If it goes up to, let's say 90 degrees or whatever, that's fine. If it goes above 100, you don't want to plant your plants in there because that composting process is still going on. Especially if you're in a large bed of soil, it's likely to stay warm. If you were to scoop it out of here while it's warm and put it in smaller containers, it's probably safe by the next day. Those are just good rules of thumb. Because this never went hot and it's probably not going to, and we have all this biological activity, my next step is to say, look, you can use this, it's ready to go. You could probably use it day 1. I like to let the moisture get optimized. I like to let the biology take over. This will make available some extra nutrients that will make your plants really happy. But one last time, I want to get in here, now that I know the temperature's not off, and I want to mix it. I want to make sure that there's no wet pockets, there's no dry pockets, there's nothing that I've overlooked. And I'm going to get all this growth on the top kind of mixed in there. And at that point, you can get ready and keep it away for storage for in the coming months when you want to use it. You could use it immediately. And so one of the most common questions that we get is, well, if I get this kit and I only use half the soil and I put the other half away, how does it stay alive? The key to living soil is growing plants in it. So when it's like this, although it's growing and breaking down nutrients, it's gonna be good for years. It's rock dust, it's compost, it's not going anywhere. But when we wanna use it again, if we've stored it away for a year and we've put it maybe in a tub or left it in the bag here, we wanna keep it out of direct contact with the sun. We don't want it to go bone dry. And if that's been followed, all we need to do is bring it back to moisture, grow some plants in it, and inoculate it with some probiotics like the Kashi Blend and Rootwise, and it's back to life. So it'll last for years. You don't need to worry about making too much. You can store it away however you see fit. The key thing to avoid is making it like mud, too much water. If you do that, it can go anaerobic, or getting it bone dry. If I had to choose one, I'd rather get it bone dry and frozen instead of wet and hot. Heat in nature, it kind of sterilizes, and also if it's overly wet, it can turn anaerobic and grow the wrong type of organisms. Worst case, you would just dry it back out and inoculate with the beneficials, you'd be fine. But since this is your first go, I just want to address that there's probably no wrong way to do this. I'm gonna mix it back up and make sure it's not overly wet anywhere, and if that's the case, it's ready to use. If you're not gonna use it all, don't overthink it. Put it in a tub. We just don't want it to be completely devoid of oxygen, so don't seal it up tight. It'd be better if it breathed. Poke some holes in the lid, leave the lid cockeyed, or just keep it in this container in your garage somewhere, ready to go. If you have questions about this, if there's things that we missed here, because we're talking about a subject that really strange questions can pop up when you're brand new to this. If I've overlooked something, put it in the comments section. Be sure to talk about it, because I kind of forget what it's like to be brand new at this, and we want to make sure we address all your important questions. If you're thinking about it, I guarantee you there's 20 more people that are thinking the same thing and they're just not willing to ask the question. So speak up. We're going to address all of those questions here, and if it's a really big one, we'll probably even answer it on video. So like I said, I just want to go through and mix this all up. One of the things that I like when you get the moisture right is you see this growth on here. Even in the daylight, normally this white growth only occurs like in the shade. And you can see where I've kind of dug in and tested temperature, so it's a different texture here, but you'll notice this crusting. To me, that means that the moisture is perfect. It's creating like a crumb texture, almost like a brownie, you know, it's a chunk that stays together. And that's part of the texture that we want to get in soil, is having it where it's not just like sand, where it's actually got this thriving biological component. But I also want to mix it all together, make sure that the bottom's not dry or anything, so you can just start mixing. I also want to make sure before I get wild, like let's see how well I did the moisture. I did 5%, which was 3.5 gallons of water in this 70 gallons of soil, and you can see all the way to the bottom, it's a little bit dry at the very bottom, and there's a couple pockets that weren't perfectly mixed. This is very likely to happen when you're mixing by hand, and that's why we usually mix it several times. And so that's what we're gonna do here, just make sure that our soil is perfect. Now that was the very bottom. I'm talking 1 inch from the bottom, it had a good moisture level. And so now we'll reincorporate it, and I think the moisture that's already in here will be enough. And then since I'm gonna use it right away, we're gonna wait to add moisture until we put it in the 3x3. If I add the moisture right now, all it's gonna do is make this heavier for me to move, and I don't wanna make my life harder. I'm gonna work smarter. I'm gonna wait to add the moisture because it's fine. Mix it up one last time. And I'll probably leave it here for a day. I may end up going this afternoon and just putting it right in that container. So don't overthink this. Just do whatever's better for your schedule. If you've got a shovel, you can use it. I just do everything by hand. You know how we use that wetting agent? It took a while for that water to seep all the way down. And I'd rather see a dry pocket or two that you're obviously gonna mix back in than have it like mud down there getting anaerobic. Sometimes you'll see people just kind of go a little extra love on the water, and you just can't take it out, and it sits down there and makes a soup, and if you mix it back in, it's usually fine. I'd rather avoid it on the dry side, just slightly. Now what I'm gonna do is go all the way around the container and get all the way down to the edges everywhere that I go. Make sure there's nothing on the very edges, and you get a little workout for the day. It's time to put it in the 10x10. Thanks for watching along this whole time. If you've got any questions about how we made this soil, or anything really in the process, be sure to put them in the comment section. We'll take the time to read through every comment, answer as many as we can. And in the next episode, we're actually gonna be using this. So be sure to subscribe, share with your buddies, and like this episode. Really helps us create more content. Thanks.